Welcome to Be Edified Daily, your channel for spiritual growth and biblical insights. We're so glad you're here. Today, we have a fascinating story for you. Have you ever wondered what words of advice the great King David gave to his son Solomon just before he passed away? This advice was not just any ordinary words. It was a heartfelt, fatherly counsel meant to prepare Solomon for the immense task ahead of him as the next king of Israel. Stay tuned, because we are about to delve into this profound moment in biblical history. Before David, the great warrior king of Israel, breathed his last, he called his son Solomon to his side. Imagine the scene: an aging king, who had experienced both triumphs and trials, speaking to his young son who was about to inherit a vast kingdom. David knew that Solomon would face many challenges as a ruler, and he wanted to leave him with words that would guide him. So, what exactly did David say? What were his final words of wisdom to his son? Today, we're going to explore the powerful advice David imparted to Solomon in 1 Kings 2 verses 1 to 9. His words were not just about ruling a kingdom, they were about living a life that honored God, being a leader with integrity, and making wise decisions. Let's dive into this incredible moment in biblical history and uncover the lessons we can learn from David's advice to Solomon. As David's time on earth drew to a close, he knew the importance of leaving his son Solomon with wisdom that would guide him throughout his reign. In 1 Kings 2 verses 1 to 9, we find David on his deathbed, speaking with a sense of urgency and deep care to his son, who would soon take over as king of Israel. "Be strong and show yourself a man," David begins. His first piece of advice to Solomon is about strength and courage. As the leader of a great nation, Solomon would need to be brave in the face of adversity and strong enough to carry the burdens of kingship. David's words echo the charge given to Joshua many years before, reminding Solomon that courage and strength are essential for anyone called to lead God's people. David continues by urging Solomon to walk in the ways of the Lord. He tells him, "Keep the charge of the Lord your God, walking in his ways and keeping his statutes, his commandments, his rules, and his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses." David knew that success and prosperity for Solomon and his descendants hinged on their obedience to God's laws. This wasn't just about following rules, it was about living a life that was fully committed to God, seeking His will in all things. Next, David speaks to Solomon about acting with justice. He reminds him to be fair and righteous, rewarding those who have been faithful and dealing with those who have been treacherous. This advice is a call for Solomon to rule with integrity and to ensure that justice is upheld in his kingdom. For David, justice wasn't just a political strategy. It was a reflection of God's own character and a crucial element of good leadership. David also gives Solomon specific instructions on how to handle certain individuals in his kingdom. He warns him about Joab, the commander of David's army, who had shed innocent blood. David tells Solomon to use his wisdom to ensure that Joab's actions do not go unpunished. Similarly, David instructs Solomon on dealing with Shimei, a man who had cursed David years earlier. David advises Solomon to keep an eye on Shimei and to bring him to justice when the time is right. In these final moments, David's words are filled with both caution and hope. He wants Solomon to be aware of the challenges he will face and to approach his reign with wisdom, strength, and a heart fully devoted to God. David's advice is not just about maintaining a throne, it's about living a life that pleases God and serves his people faithfully. As Solomon listens to his father's final words, he is left with a clear blueprint for his reign. But would he follow this advice? Would he live up to the expectations set before him? David's words were meant to guide Solomon, but as we will see, Solomon's journey as king would be filled with both triumphs and failures. Stay tuned as we explore how Solomon responded to his father's counsel and the lessons we can learn from his reign. Despite the clear and heartfelt advice given to him by his father, King David, Solomon's reign was not without its flaws and failures. David had laid out a path for Solomon, one marked by strength, courage, obedience to God's laws, justice, and wisdom in dealing with those who had wronged David and the nation. However, as Solomon took the throne and his rule progressed, it became evident that he did not fully adhere to all the advice his father had given him. One of the first signs of Solomon's deviation from David's counsel was his approach to justice and handling the affairs of the kingdom. David had specifically instructed Solomon to deal with Joab and Shimei, two men whose past actions had brought turmoil and danger to the kingdom. Initially, Solomon acted decisively. He ordered the execution of Joab, who had killed two commanders of Israel's army, and he dealt with Shimei when he broke an oath to stay within the boundaries set by Solomon. At first glance, Solomon seemed to be following his father's counsel to bring justice to those who had been treacherous. However, as Solomon's reign continued, he began to stray from the other crucial aspects of David's advice. David had urged Solomon to be strong and courageous, to lead with a heart committed to God, and to adhere strictly to the laws of Moses. Yet, Solomon's actions began to reflect a different path. Solomon, known for his wisdom, soon became entangled in political alliances that were contrary to the law of Moses. He married many foreign women, princesses and daughters of neighboring kings, to secure peace and political stability. These marriages, while politically advantageous, led Solomon away from a wholehearted devotion to God. His foreign wives brought with them their own gods and religious practices, and over time, Solomon's heart was swayed. He began to build high places for these foreign gods, allowing idolatry to seep into the very heart of Israel. This was a direct violation of God's commandments, and it led the nation into spiritual compromise. Moreover, Solomon's accumulation of wealth, horses, and chariots also went against the guidelines laid out for Israelite kings in the law of Moses. David had cautioned Solomon to remain obedient to God's laws, but Solomon's pursuit of grandeur and wealth overshadowed his commitment to God. His desire to expand his kingdom's riches and military might lead to heavy taxation and forced labor among the Israelites, causing unrest and discontent among the people. Solomon's failure to fully heed David's counsel had serious consequences. His actions set a precedent that led the nation away from a pure and devoted worship of the Lord. The kingdom that David had unified began to fracture, and seeds of division were sown. After Solomon's death, the kingdom would eventually split into two, the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah, a division that would lead to centuries of conflict and upheaval. David's advice to Solomon was rooted in a deep understanding of what it took to lead a nation under God's guidance. However, Solomon's choices reflected a departure from these ideals, leading to both personal and national consequences. Solomon's story serves as a powerful reminder that even the wisest among us can falter if we stray from God's path. His life shows the importance of obedience, humility, and a heart fully committed to God. David's final words to Solomon were more than just instructions from a father to his son. They were a blueprint for righteous leadership and a godly life. Understanding the essence of David's advice helps us grasp why these words were so critical for Solomon and why they still hold profound lessons for us today. 1. Be strong and courageous. David's first piece of advice to Solomon was to be strong and courageous. This was not just about physical strength or the bravery needed to fight battles. It was a call to moral and spiritual fortitude. Solomon would face numerous challenges, both external and internal, during his reign. He needed the courage to stand firm in his convictions, to lead with integrity, and to make difficult decisions that would not always be popular. Courage was essential not only to confront the enemies outside the kingdom, but also to resist the temptations that would come from within his own heart and court. For Solomon, this meant remaining steadfast in his faith and leading by example, showing unwavering commitment to God's ways. 2. Follow God's laws. David emphasized the importance of walking in obedience to God's commandments, statutes, and decrees as written in the law of Moses. This was a clear directive for Solomon to prioritize his relationship with God above all else. Obedience to God's laws was not a matter of legalism but a demonstration of love and respect for the Creator. David knew that Israel's prosperity and security were directly linked to their faithfulness to God. By following God's laws, Solomon and his descendants would ensure a reign marked by divine favor and blessing. David's advice here was not just for Solomon's benefit, but for the welfare of the entire nation. A king who walked in God's ways would lead his people toward spiritual health and prosperity. 3. Act with justice. Justice was another cornerstone of David's counsel. He urged Solomon to act with integrity, rewarding those who were faithful and dealing justly with those who had committed wrongs. For David, justice was more than a political tool, it was a reflection of God's righteousness. Solomon's role as king was not merely to rule but to embody the principles of fairness, mercy, and justice. This meant creating a kingdom where the innocent were protected, the guilty were held accountable, and the rule of law was upheld. By acting justly, Solomon would demonstrate his commitment to God's character and maintain peace and order in the kingdom. 4. Handle the house of Joab and Shimei with wisdom. David's specific instructions regarding Joab and Shimei were lessons in wisdom and discernment. Joab, a former commander, had shed innocent blood, acting with violence and without justice. Shimei had cursed David during a time of great vulnerability. David advised Solomon to use wisdom in dealing with these men, ensuring that justice was served while maintaining the stability of the kingdom. These instructions were a test of Solomon's ability to balance justice with mercy and to manage complex political dynamics with godly wisdom. The essence of David's advice. At its core, David's advice to Solomon was about cultivating a heart aligned with God's will. He wanted Solomon to understand that true strength comes from dependence on God, that genuine success is rooted in obedience, and that wise leadership is characterized by justice and integrity. David's words were meant to prepare Solomon for the challenges ahead, guiding him to make decisions that honored God and strengthened the kingdom. For us today, the essence of David's advice remains relevant. We are called to be strong and courageous in our faith, to walk in obedience to God's word, to act justly in our dealings with others, and to seek wisdom in all we do. Solomon's story serves as both a warning and an encouragement, a reminder of the importance of staying true to God's path and the blessings that come from living a life that honors Him. As we reflect on David's final words, let's consider how we can apply these timeless principles in our own lives. How can we be strong and courageous in our faith? How can we ensure that our actions reflect God's justice and love? And how can we walk in obedience to His commands, trusting that His ways are always best? Join us in the next chapter as we conclude this story with key takeaways and lessons that can inspire us in our own spiritual journeys. As we conclude today's journey through the powerful exchange between King David and his son Solomon, let's take a moment to reflect on how these timeless lessons can shape our lives today. The advice David gave to Solomon wasn't just for a young king on the brink of his reign. It was guidance that speaks to each of us in our everyday lives. David's words remind us to be strong and courageous in our faith, to follow God's commandments with all our hearts, to act with justice and fairness in all our dealings, and to seek godly wisdom in every decision we make. These principles are as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago, providing a foundation for living a life that honors God and positively impacts those around us. Now, it's your turn. How can you apply these lessons to your life? Here are some steps you can take today. Reflect on your courage and strength in faith. Are there areas in your life where you need to be more courageous in your faith? Maybe it's standing firm in your beliefs at work or school, or perhaps it's stepping out in faith to follow a calling that God has placed on your heart. Take a moment to pray for the strength and courage to follow God's leading, just as David encouraged Solomon to do. Commit to following God's commandments. Spend time in God's Word daily to understand His commandments and how they apply to your life. Consider setting aside time each day for Bible study and prayer, asking God to guide you in His truth and help you live a life that is pleasing to Him. Act with justice and integrity. Are there situations in your life where you need to act more justly or with greater integrity? Whether it's in your business dealings, relationships, or how you treat others, strive to reflect God's righteousness in all you do. Remember, justice is not just a concept, it's a way of living that honors God and serves others. Seek wisdom from God. Make it a daily practice to ask God for wisdom. Just as Solomon did at the beginning of his reign, seek God's guidance in every decision, big or small. Trust that His wisdom will lead you down the right path and help you navigate life's complexities with grace and discernment. Avoid compromise. Reflect on any areas where you might be compromising in your faith or actions. Are there small compromises that could lead you away from God's best for your life? Take a stand today to live fully for God, avoiding the pitfalls that come from straying off His path. We invite you to take these steps with us and grow in your faith journey. If this message has inspired you, we encourage you to share it with others who might also be blessed by it. Thank you for being part of our community here on Be Edified Daily.